Let me get that. All right, so let me share my screen and then we'll get kicked off and get ready to go. Sound like a plan? All right. All right, can everybody see that lovely PowerPoint we got there? Doesn't it look fancy, gang? All right, let me go ahead and just welcome everybody. So I'm excited to kick off the second meeting of our ALICE Report initiative. The first one was in February in person, and now we've started a virtual one. I wanted to go ahead and welcome some of our special guests. So first of all, I'm Bobby, for those of you that may not know me. I am the Executive Director for the Southeastern Credit Union Foundation, and I have with us, we've got Brittany Burnett with United Way, we've got George McCandless, and I think, did I see Michael Smith on yet? We got a couple of those special guests, and we'll also hear from Roy today, kind of talking through some things. And then we do have some staff members from the league on as well. So we are excited to have this full group and kind of get going and have some robust conversation and some exciting new updates as well. And for a little bit of kind of background and for level setting. So this project really started in 2023, really about bringing the report to Georgia when it hadn't been there before. So we started out initially, I don't know if everybody remembers the number of emails that we sent out about sponsoring the ALICE report. So we want to give a big thank you for all those that were able to do that and bring that report here to us. But then now the real work begins, right? We want to dive into that data and see what we can do and how we can come together with our partner United Ways and really make an impact for those ALICE households that we know are here in Georgia. And hopefully that we can help bring to another level and get some support for them where we know we can. It's super alignment mission, right? We know the United Way does good work. We know that they want to help these households, and we do the exact same thing. And that's what our products and services are here to support. So with that, I want to go, oh, and I also want to make sure that everybody is aware that this is kind of a level setting too. While yes, this may be a second meeting for others, we wanted to bring in as many credit unions as we could and go ahead and get started and make sure that you are engaged if you weren't able to attend that February meeting. We're going to have a little brief overview so that we can get everybody kind of caught up to speed. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the February meeting and see if there were any call outs or any updates from there, and then kind of talk a little bit moving forward. So with that, I want to go ahead and throw it over to Brittany, who's going to give us a little bit about the ALICE overview. And you just tell me next slide whenever you're ready, Brittany.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see some familiar names and faces on the screen, also some new ones. As Bobby said, we're so thankful for the support from all of you to get us to this point, to have brought the ALICE report here to Georgia. And I know some of you likely heard what I've called the ALICE 101 overview, but we're also here today to share some new data with you. We'll give a high-level overview about ALICE. And so even if you've already heard that part and know that what we're then bringing forth is some new data. So the whole goal is really to get you thinking and really empowering you to use this data so that it works best in your environment. We know that you know your members best, you know your community best, and there are some things that may work well for one area that maybe are different for another. So our purpose is to bring this data forward to you so that you can use it, so you can be most impactful in the work you do every day. So if we can go next slide, please, Bobby. Here we go. Okay. So the name of this is just called ALICE and the Cross Currents, and it's an update on financial hardship, as this is really what I'll call almost like a post-pandemic report to you. So just for a high-level overview, as Bobby said, there are a handful of us from United Way on the call, but some people are likely wondering, like, why is United Way presenting this? So I'll give you a little overview, one about United Way, then we'll jump straight into the data. But just for a high level, United Way was founded in Denver in 1887. And there are over 1,100 United Ways across the United States and across the world. You can read there some additional statistics about us, but I do think one thing that makes us really unique is that each United Way is its own 501c3. We're independent and autonomous from each other. We have local boards, and we are always looking at where the needs are greatest in our local community. So if you live in a community and you give to your local United Way, know that the dollars are staying right there in your local area. Next slide. So there are 30 United Ways across the state. So I don't expect you to be able to read this map, but just for a visual and for you to see, you can see there are United Ways that cover one county, and there are United Ways that cover 13 counties. So we cover the entire gamut, but there are 30 of us, United Ways that cover the entire state of Georgia. Next slide. So United for Alice. So some people have asked, like, where did all of this start? How did United for Alice start? So it actually started with a board member about 15 years ago who was serving on the board of directors for United Way of Northern New Jersey. And she kept asking some additional questions and started looking at what happens if we layer some additional data on top of the current data we've got, and let's really start to identify where there's some hardship from families in a space that traditionally we haven't talked much about. And so that is really the genesis of United for Alice. And as you can see here, it's a comprehensive measure of financial hardship. And then we've got data for over 3,000 counties from across the entire United States. You see there on the map is Georgia. So the blue states are the official Alice states. And we in Georgia were the 29th state to join the Alice movement. We're one of the newbies, if you will, who joined this movement. Next slide, Bobby. So who is Alice? Well, Alice is an acronym that stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, Employed. And these are households that make more than the federal poverty level, but they make less than what they need to meet the basics of a household survival budget. These are families that we see every single day. We need them to keep our economies moving forward. They are in many times essential jobs, restaurant, retail, healthcare, education, many of these jobs that we all need in our communities. But quite frankly, they're not making enough. And for families that aren't making enough and can hardly get by, there's little, if any, savings, and there's really no room for any sort of unexpected emergency, and really no room for any future savings or investments. Next slide. So some of the challenges that our Alice families face is we've got an outdated federal poverty level. So, again, the federal poverty level is the determining factor for many social services. So even though some families make, more than the federal poverty level, it quite frankly isn't enough. But if they make above that level, many times they're ineligible for any sort of traditional public assistance. And even though they're working and they're working hard, their wages are not keeping up with some of the basics, as I know that we've all felt, especially in the past few years. So for something like inflation or even a medical crisis, a car crisis, anything having to do with your health, home, these sort of things hit these families a lot harder. And as you can imagine, when you are going really day to day, week to week, or month to month, there's elevated levels of anxiety and depression because you simply don't know how you're going to make ends meet. Next slide. So I'm just going to brief over this for just a minute. We already defined Alice, households making more than the federal poverty level, less than what they need to basically make ends meet. But then you'll hear us through this presentation talk about families living below the Alice threshold. And so I want to make sure you know that definition. So that's Alice families here, plus families living in poverty. And when you add those two together, those are families living below the Alice threshold. So for the rest of the slides, we'll talk about families below the Alice threshold. So again, just for some context, it's both of those populations.
This really gets on my nerves.
Okay, so for the state of Georgia, you can see here that we've got over 4 million households throughout the state. And if you look at the chart, you'll see 13% of those households are living in poverty. You'll also see the light blue part of the chart shows 35% are those Alice households. Over a third of our households in Georgia are these Alice households. And then when you add those two parts of the blue chart together, you can see that 1.9 million or 48% of the households in our state are living below the Alice threshold. And again, when we talk about Alice, we're talking about them and as a household, not necessarily an individual person. So it's 1.9 million households living below the Alice threshold. Next slide. And so when we think about a household survival budget, we typically think of these 8 items. So most of us think of food and housing when we think of things that are most expensive in our budget. And then we have 2 different types of care, healthcare and childcare. And then what I call the 3 T's, taxes, transportation, and technology. And then you'll see there's an extra item in there for miscellaneous. And so these are the 8 basics that are needed to make up a household survival budget. There is an entire really long methodology on what is factored into each of these. How do you factor in what food costs for a family of 4 or housing for someone, for a single person? What is technology? What counts as a technology line item? And so there's a huge amount of definitions behind that if you're interested, but these are the 8 basic categories. So now let's look and see that in action. Bobby, next slide. So I hope you can read this, but just for the state of Georgia, at least, if we look at those 8 basic categories, and for example, that first column that says single adult, you can see that adult needs to make $29,376 per year to meet the basic for their household survival budget. And then when you do the math on that, that's $14.69 an hour. And so, the first item you can see there is housing, and it says rent. Some of you may say, where in the world can you find somewhere to live for $607 a month? Well, I'll tell you again, with some of these definitions, it's like, this is a HUD definition here, just like food is a USDA healthy food, line item there. So that's what makes up all of this, but there's various factors there. But you can see for the single adult, it's just under $15 an hour. For a single adult who's over 65, it's nearly $17 an hour. And then for a family of 4, including 2 who are in daycare, you can see for that family, they need to make over $38 an hour to meet the basics of the household survival budget. Again, we talk basics, we mean bare bones. So that's just a snapshot, at least as far as Georgia goes. But we've got these for, all states. And then we also have it by county as well. If you're thinking about looking at these numbers for a particular county or counties where your credit union has a presence. Next slide. So then when we look across the state for that same family of 4 we were talking about earlier, in some parts of the state, for example, in Emmanuel County, that family needs to make $67,000 a year. And then for that same family, if they live in Forsyth County, just north of Atlanta, they need to make $110,000 a year. So you can really see that there's a wide range there for that same family, depending on where they live, of how much it actually costs. And I will tell you, when we did some presentations back in February with the credit unions initially, that number for Forsyth County was $93,000. So just for some context, in 1 year's time, that amount has gone up by $17,000. Next slide, Bobby. So then when you look here, you may find your community here on this map. We just pinned a few different locations. So I wanted to highlight a few things. So when we look across the state, when we look, for example, in Oconee County, which is right there near Athens, in that county, 28% of their families are living below the ALICE threshold. And at the other end of the continuum, you look on that map at the dark blue county, which is Wheeler County, and an unbelievable 85% of the families in Wheeler County are living below the ALICE threshold. But what I can also tell you is within a county, we can see some differences. So right outside of Atlanta in Fulton County, parts of the county, North Fulton County, 18% of those families are living below the ALICE threshold. And then when you go to South Fulton County, 80% of those families are below the ALICE threshold. So it varies, across the state, and then it can also vary by county. And I tell you that because as you can dig into some of this data for yourself, it may make sense for you to look within your county if there's a certain place where you should focus some of your efforts. Next slide. So just for a quick snapshot and for some context, in 1 year's time between 2021 and 2022, we saw an increase of 50,000 more ALICE households in Georgia. 50,000 in just 1 year. Next slide. So when we look at the number of households that are experiencing the highest level of hardship, it's Indigenous, Black, and Hispanic families, families who are led by those under 25 or over 65, and single female led households with children. On the other side, the lowest percent hardship are for white and Asian families, working age families, and married with children families, most of the time because there are two incomes with that married with children family. So there's less hardship there. Next slide. So just for a quick snapshot here, 65% of the top 20 jobs across the state are still paying less than $20 an hour. And even though some jobs like retail saw that there was an increase in their median wage over 1 year, it's still not enough. And those families are still struggling and they still need some assistance. Next slide. So how does Georgia compare? People always want to know how we stand up against others. So you can see here in Alaska as a state, 33% of those families are living below the ALICE threshold. And then in Mississippi, 52% of those families are below the ALICE threshold. If you remember a few slides back, Georgia is 48%, which ironically also ranks us number 48. So that's where we stand. That's not where we want to be. And last year we were ranked 47. So this is not the direction we want to be moving. Next slide, Bobby. And so just for a quick snapshot here, as I mentioned, we've got 50,000 more ALICE households in 1 year's time. And much of that is because, for example, for a family of 4, they saw on average a loss of up to $15,000 in tax credits and other supports that they received, kind of during the pandemic for some of those supports. And those in 2022 then went away. And so we saw a huge increase. That's one of the main reasons we're seeing an increase in the number of ALICE households, is because those supports and credits have gone away. Next slide. And so I think this is really interesting here. And I want to bring up a point that someone asked me earlier today about this. When we look at this dark blue line, you can see that's the line of households in poverty in our state. And since 2010, so for the last 12 years, that number has remained relatively flat. And actually, it's gone down by 6% when we look at the number of households who are in poverty. But really pay attention to the light blue part of the chart, because that's our ALICE households. And since 2010, we've seen a 38% increase in the number of ALICE households in our state. So I will also tell you that, yes, we've had a lot of people move into Georgia. So we've had 15% more families. But what I think is astonishing is that there's a 38% in these ALICE households. So again, this is really kind of a hidden pocket of families, really kind of a forgotten group of folks that we haven't talked much about. But we know that many of these are your members. Next slide, Bobby. So just for a quick snapshot, this shows 44% of families across the state who have children are struggling in some way. That's too many families in our community. Next slide, Bobby. And then I really want to bring up this next slide here, which is on older Americans. So what we are also finding is an increase in the number of ALICE families for those who are in households that are older than 65. And so right now, 56% of Georgians, led by a household who's over 65, are really unable to afford the basics. That's over 500,000 households. And if you think about this for a minute, we've got these families who worked really hard and saved and saved and saved. And now here they are at a point where they haven't saved enough. And this was not expected, but now over 56% of our seniors are unable to afford the basics. So we're seeing this change in family dynamics as numerous generations are now living together, quite frankly, because many times it is the most affordable way to survive. Next slide, Bobby. So I do want to point you just quickly, I want to let you know, you heard all this information. And when I've given this presentation before, I think I've said, well, that's kind of a downer. You give all this kind of doom and gloom information, but really for us, it's presenting some solid facts to all of you so that you can think about what you want to do about it. And so I wanted to direct you to a part on the site, the United for ALICE website, called ALICE in Action. And this is a place where you can go and you can look to see what other states have done, what in what years they've done things, around what sort of population. And it's a great way for us, as all the states involved with this ALICE movement, can share some best practices. And this is where we've seen some nonprofits, I've talked to recently, they're using this ALICE data to determine where to do their work. One is actually looking at where they're going to possibly put their next Boys and Girls Club, and they're using ALICE data to look at where most of their ALICE families are, and they'll put the club there. Or they will look at, there's some, mobile food distributions around many of our communities. Well, they're now looking at this data to determine where the highest number of ALICE families live in their community, and they're putting those services right there where the ALICE families are. So it's a very, very robust tool right here that you can look at and look at some best practices of who's already doing this work. Great. Next slide, Bobby. And so just a couple of examples of this, I know I've shared this with some of you, is, there's medical debt relief, where organizations are pooling money together to really relieve mass amounts of medical debt from families, because that ends up being such a huge burden to so many working families. In some of your communities, like we do here in Augusta, we have the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program, known as VITA, and it provides free tax preparation services to ALICE families. And we can now look at where we put our VITA sites. We do that based on where the highest number of ALICE families live in our local community. The Federal Reserve Bank uses this for their benefits cliff tool. Communities are having roundtables now to talk about, how they use this data to have the most impact. Some funders are looking at maybe adjusting some of their funding priorities to really focus on these ALICE households. But you can learn more on the United for ALICE website, but those are just a couple of quick examples. I think I've got one more slide here. So, and then again, thanks so much to all of you for making this possible. We're so grateful that you are the group that helped bring this project forward. And let me tell you, it's getting a lot of really great traction. There's a lot of interest. And I've heard people, at least in our community now, saying, oh, I now understand that's an ALICE family. And I think if nothing else, it creates a lens of empathy that maybe we didn't have before, as we think about many of these hardworking families, as many of them could be our neighbors, could be our coworkers, or maybe could be us. So I will stop there, and I think I'll turn it back over to Bobby. But I appreciate all of your time. Hopefully you learned a little bit more about ALICE, or if you'd already heard ALICE 101, you learned a little bit more about the updated data.
Thank you, Brittany. It's always eye-opening to see that data. And I wanted to call out something I was thinking about when you were looking at the household budget for just a single family. And I noticed that didn't even include childcare. So if you put childcare in the mix, then that really puts them way over their budget of anything that they could afford. So interesting. Thank you for that. And hopefully we'll move the needle a little bit on all this and get some good stuff happening. Any questions for Brittany before we move on? Any thoughts? Well, all right. Well, now I'm going to turn it over to Roy. Roy Bibb, I don't know, I'm pretty sure everybody on here knows him, the CEO for Mid-South Credit Union, and he has actually been the spearhead for this project. He started it along with George McCandless with United Way, gosh, beginning of February 2023, maybe. Seems like a long time ago. But I've really enjoyed working with him and getting this project up and off the ground. And I turn it over to you, Roy, to really kind of get us going and give a little overview of the February meeting and see if anybody has any updates.
All righty. Well, first thing, you somehow believe that I have some kind of ability to recall what happened last in February, which is challenging enough, to say the least. We had an opportunity to come together, aligned with our government meetings in Atlanta, and had an opportunity, and thanks to our friends at Atlanta Postal for hosting us and sitting down and meeting and just really kind of collaborating a little bit. I think the best thoughts of the day really came when we got to get in small groups and talk about and learn and share a little bit about what I loved about ALICE. This is not, it's the new way of talking about the folks that we serve, but not a new group of folks that we're going to start serving. It's just as a way to better understand, I think, their needs for me, it was really surprising to learn how many of these folks work here at Mid-South. You know, I looked at the numbers today and a prep work, and be honest with you, my stepson and his wife and his fiance have 2 children. They pay childcare for 2 folks. They have good jobs, but guess what? Based on where they live, they're Alice families. You're surprised at what it takes. And for me, it does really a couple of things. And I serve on the board of trustees for our local United Way with George McCandless. He leads as the CEO for our Middle Georgia United Way and does an amazing job. And he brought this thought to us last year. And thank you to all of my peers that joined in. And the other thing I'd really ask you and encourage you to your peers at your, even if they weren't involved with the funding, we don't care. Be involved with the good work. You know, that this is an opportunity, and the information is easy to find. You go online, you look at it, that reports aren't hidden. It's some really good information and a good understanding. And we spent in my shop today with my training director and my VP of HR administration talking about how we could do more with Alice. And really just one of the things that came out of our brainstorming is let's make sure we're focused on our team members as well. And start in-house and let this overflow to our community as well. We have been working, Kelsey, our training director and leader, been working with our local United Way to do financial counseling. That's the most we've done so far that's tangible with Alice folks in our community. It's been well received. We even got a segment on the news. It's great feedback, you know, for our credit union. So, but I really think it's connecting locally is really where you're going to develop the programs. We talked today about creating, we don't know what we're going to name them because I don't know that we want to name them Alice accounts on at least member facing. We may do that, you know, in our core so we can understand them, but create accounts that we can measure impact, that we can provide no fee services, special savings accounts, different things like that. And I know that some of them, I don't know if Kabir's online or not. I'm going to call you out if you are, Kabir. I know he was going to try to be, but you know, he shared a loan product that he was already doing for folks in that community. And I know that I see Stephen and other folks out there. I know you guys have stories as well. So I know Debbie Smith, I saw you, and I know you have some information maybe you can share about what you guys are already doing with the Alice community if you're still on as well. I'm just calling everybody out. There you are. You're on mute. You're still on mute.
Okay.
There you go.
So I have a couple of colleagues on the phone call as well. Adam and Carolina have joined us as well. Adam, can you speak to some of the things that we are doing? We've had a lot of roundtable discussions, product design. We're also working for CDFI. So Adam, are you there? There he is.
I am. Thank you very much. So yeah, we've been really targeting how we approach this from not only an organizational perspective, but also a product perspective. And one of the things that we've done recently is try to give folks that might fall into this category an opportunity to benefit from the market rates that other folks with a lot of money might benefit from. So we changed our high earning savings account, which is essentially the same thing as a high yield savings account. We started this process, when we started the product, we required a $25,000 balance to earn the high interest rate. And in, I believe it was July, my folks keep me honest, but I believe it was July, we changed that and shifted to say, if you had a net increase into that account of $100 or more, regardless of your balance, you would still earn the high rate. And so that was one way for us to give back to the community and encourage savings, as well as make it feasible from that perspective. We are actually envisioning a whole new product set that we're working on through our strategic planning process now, as to how we can better serve those members. And some of those product sets include offering services like telehealth and some other products that might be beneficial to not only their financial well-being, but their personal well-being. And so that's just a couple of the ways that we're exploring our efforts and how we're trying to really invest in that community. Debbie also alluded to our CDFI process. So we are currently going down that path to see if there are other opportunities that we can engage in partnership with the Treasury Department to extend our reach into some of those markets in Georgia that we really feel we could help, and then that have become somewhat of a financial desert.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point in regards to product sets and all that, and we're trying to do the same thing. We talked a little bit today about creating that savings account with a kind of a reverse in mind, pay them a higher yield than folks earn with more money, and or a bonus if they 90 average day balance increases by a certain amount, and adding to it, and because it's amazing. A little encouragement, creating good habits, it has a big impact. So that's great thoughts. Anybody else want to share? One of the other things that I found to be powerful from a United Way standpoint is when we go talk to new folks to contribute and be a part of giving to United Way, was using this to really help them understand the people that we're helping. And I had a meeting yesterday, a lunch meeting with, happened to be my dentist reaching out. We have a new program, small business, inviting small businesses to come in to be part of United Way when maybe they wouldn't run a campaign. You don't have a lot of folks, and being able to leverage ALICE and show who we're trying to impact has been a powerful source, and also asking other folks to give through campaigns and things like that. It really helps define, and it really, I think, it defines the great partnership and aligns what we do as credit unions and what United Way is trying to do as well. What I encourage anybody to do is again, if you haven't already connected with your local United Way folks, there's where you can really, because they know where the need is, and they'll invite you to come in if you're willing to sit and listen. And that's what's happened to us. We didn't go find it. We just created an atmosphere where help us help you, and then we've gotten invited in to do that. So I would encourage you that. Kabir, I think you've joined us. Are you online, sir?
I'm here, sir.
Good. Hey, can you tell me, you talked about a program you guys had really helping ALICE folks. I think it was a 555 loan, something like that. Do I remember that correctly?
Yes, so we have actually three programs, three products, I would say. One is the 555 that you just mentioned, which is $5,000, up to $5,000 loans at 5% for up to 5 years. So the monthly payment comes to pretty close to about $100 a month, so it's more affordable. And we've had people want to put sometimes down payment that they don't have. They want to rent in a nicer neighborhood or good schools, so that, just promoting them, their next generation, to go at a better school. And, we have had where sometimes they don't have a job for a month or 15 days. They've got a job again, and they've missed a rent payment or stuff like that. So to fill that gap, we give those loans. The other two products that we have is auto loans, low income auto loans. The only criteria is your income should be less than $3,000 a month for 555 for even the low income auto. And the auto loan is up to $20,000 max. And the rate is what we give our second tier, which is A- credit borrowers. So even if their credit is in the 500s, we'll do the loan for them at the second tier rate that we have, the second lowest tier. And the final one is vocational income program. This is for people who are going back to school. They are trying to get some skills added to add additional income or a second income. So male or female, could be anyone. The second spouse trying to gain some additional education, could be HVAC licensing, could be commercial driving license, CDL for truck drivers. We have done these. I'm giving examples of what we have done. Beauty school, beauty salon school, QuickBooks or accounting training so they can maintain books for someone or work as an accountant. So things like that, even inventory verification, so they get certification and they get certain, like our banks and credit unions do commercial loans that has inventory as collateral. They require monthly or quarterly inventory valuation. So these are inventory valuators that pay $500,000 to get those school done certification, and they can do this as a second job per se to increase their income basically. So those are the 3 products currently we offer to our membership for low income.
Thank you, Kabir.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Roy. Thank you for all for sharing as well. Anybody else doing anything they want to share before we
I
continue?
have a question for Kabir, if you don't mind me asking Kabir a question.
I guess not. Kabir, do you want to answer a question?
He's asking too many questions every day.
What's been your experience in losses with that 555 program with lower income?
Yes, so going into it, we were expecting anywhere from 5 to 10% losses without any experience. We were just building that into our program. But for now, we are looking at about 2% loss rate, which is lower than our expectation actually. Yep.
All right, thank you, Kabir.
And we've been doing it for about 2.5, 3 years now.
Perfect. Anybody else? Any thoughts? Well, thank you for sharing, everybody. And Roy, thank you for the recap from February. I appreciate it. You did a great job. You remembered a lot, so it was good. I also want to you guys will all get the slide deck. It has a lot of great information about Alice after this meeting, but I also just kind of wanted to draw your attention. If you haven't started yet in your communities or are looking to kind of try to bring it along a little bit, the suggested action items for collaboration with your local United Ways, we provided that at the end of the February meeting, but this can be a little reminder of where do you start, how do you get started. This is a great kind of list for you to kind of look through and get started. And if you don't know who your local United Way rep is or CEO in your community, let us know. We'll get you in touch. I'm sure they would be happy to collaborate with you and sit down and brainstorm. All right, and I think we have some exciting news too about some new information coming out about Alice. And I wasn't sure, was it Michael or Brittany who was going to go through the new indicators? Michael?
We can both speak on it.
Okay, well,
We can both talk about it.
great. Well, we've got Michael Smith, who is also the CEO of the United Way in the Valdosta area, who's joined us as well. So him and Brittany are going to kind of tag team this exciting new data that has become available.
This is a new thing that United for Alice has created in Georgia, along with Florida, New Jersey, Tennessee, and I believe one other state kind of paid for the platinum version of the Alice report this year. And on the website, under the Georgia data, when you look at county and, like I said, legislative mapping tools and descriptions and demographics, you can see a well-being tab. And there's 50 different indicators of well-being for county data. And some of it is as recent as 2022. Some of the data goes further back, but you can see where the description and where the source of the data comes from. And on that, it'll tell you why that matters for a community and where that county ranks across the state. We're definitely seeing it's interesting with the percentage of people that are homeownership burden, rent burden, food insecurity, amount of communities that have investment income. Like I know Lowndes County, only 11% of households have investable income, and that's, retirement accounts and things like that. And then there's a whole thing, life expectancy, percentage of English speaking foreign born in your community. You can flip to the next slide that show. And so this is a great way to pull more data and understand, the demographics and the opportunities and challenges of your community or area. Access to parks, access to mental health, access to dental care. Brittany, I mean, do you have anything else to share with that?
No, I just think that this is just another example of how robust the United for Alice website is. So in addition, again, to information about, your county or your zip code, or even down to census tract, the fact that you can use this additional part of the website, which again, Michael had mentioned, this is a new for us, these 50 additional indicators, but it just, I was looking recently at, something like commute time. And so if you live in a larger area, you likely have, or even a more rural area, you likely have longer commute times, and what that can mean or say. Also the prevalence of diabetes in your community, or the percentage of children experiencing food insecurity. There's so many ways to use this data. So I would encourage you all just to take a minute and to look through it, because there could be some areas that maybe you weren't thinking about, but now you realize, if I've got the data, I think Michael put it in there, if I've got the data and now maybe I actually can use this data for something, I wasn't sure how I could use these indicators before. So we're really excited to be able to roll these out. Only a handful of states have all of these like we do in Georgia, but again, the purpose is to make sure we're empowering you to make some really solid decisions.
Thank you.
I
That's
think
exciting.
I think Arkansas and a few other states only paid for a piece, like they only wanted the housing data, but we paid for the whole package. And of course, you got a discount for paying for all 50 indicators. United for Alice also has national information that they've done reports on veterans, people with disabilities. One of their new reports that's coming out, I think by the end of the year, will be Alice in the nonprofit human service sector, because like y'all mentioned, some of your credit union employees are Alice. A lot of people that work for homeless shelters are almost homeless themselves, or work at food banks, are also food secure because of pay and wages and benefits. So their new national report will be about Alice in the nonprofit human service sector. So we're up to now, we were the 29th state, but now Alabama's come on board, Washington, D.C., Colorado, and I think North Carolina. I think we're up to 34 states. And I know Minnesota and Oklahoma are looking to bring this into their states.
And just thanks for plugging that Alabama part. So we are taking the model that you guys have created here in Georgia and mirroring it in Alabama with the Alabama credit unions as well. So you guys are really leading the charge for our region and how we can support and work with our local United Ways to answer some of these issues with these Alice households. So I just met with the United Way CEOs last week, and I just kept dropping, Georgia credit unions did this, Georgia credit unions this, they've had this meeting, they've done this. So you guys, there might be a little competition there, but I like some healthy competition if it's for a good cause. So keep on leading the charge, gang. At this opportunity, I think we've done a lot of talking. I think I'd love to kind of open up the floor for some dialogue and some discussion. I know you guys aren't a shy group, so feel free to chime in. I did put some questions that we can answer to kind of get you guys started, but I love the conversation to just be natural and go where it needs to go. And I was gonna turn that over again to Michael and Brittany or Roy or whoever to facilitate, because I feel like you guys hear from me all the time. Go ahead. Start talking. I'm just kidding. I'll start with we'll start with just the first question. So what barriers, if any, have you faced in beginning a partnership with your local United Way, and what support would help you overcome them? So any that maybe have tried to reach out to United Ways or have a barrier with staff or whatever, let's throw that out there. Let's talk a little bit about some of that and how we can overcome that issue.
Hey, Bobby.
Yes.
I wouldn't say it's not a barrier now, but I think what might be challenging is every credit union has their own foundation. We're focused with several partners, and how do you prioritize that? How do you convince the rest of the executive team or the board, this is going to be very important for us to get involved. So I think I'm still processing that, and Priska, our foundation managers on the call. So it's really prioritizing and getting the buy-in that this is very critical for us to get involved. And I'm not saying we're not going to get the support. It's really how we're discussing on how to approach this better. So if anybody has any suggestions, I would love to hear it.
That's a really good question, Huey. And hello. We're lucky in the sense we don't have the foundation, so we're kind of leveraging this as our way into the community. So it does make it a little bit easier. The only advice I would have is it's really just packaging what we already do. And maybe the creation of what I would term Alice accounts can be there to leverage your current foundation and the good works that you're already doing. I haven't had to lead through that. So I certainly don't have the answer, but as we look to raise the funds to support the Alice reporting, that was a challenge with larger credit unions that had foundations because they already were doing great things and they wanted to focus on those things that they've been successful at, which is certainly understandable. So basically, not a whole lot of help.
One thing I would say, we want y'all, just like we want nonprofits to use this data to be able to write better grants and tell their stories. And then, of course, local and state leaders for public policy change. We want y'all to use this data so that y'all can understand y'all's demographic of your clientele better in the area. And like you said, you can see zip codes or census tract. I mean, there's some zip codes in counties that may only have 40% Alice, but then another zip code in the same county, maybe 70+% Alice. So maybe if y'all are looking at targeting ATMs or branch locations or community outreach parks, financial literacy, partnering through United Way to then connect with like maybe a Boys and Girls Club for a parenting class, or, the domestic violence shelter or homeless shelter to do financial classes and literacy. A lot of us United Ways fund those programs so we can be that connection and help with response, because if you're giving someone money, usually you get the response. I mean, I know with our 23 partners, we speak daily, if not monthly, with these directors and can build that. And they're looking for that, whether it's bringing in Goodwill or a credit union to teach classes, or like you said, the tech college for some of the school opportunities. One thing Brittany's done with 211, we're trying, if you're not familiar with 211, it is a national number, but only Georgia and Ohio are the only two states that don't have full statewide coverage. But you can call 211, text, web chat, to get information for human services. Who does utility bills? Who helps with veteran services? Where are food banks located? Where's a homeless shelter located? And putting some of y'all's products that are local into that 211 database. So when people do call, and we have people call for the most random things, but they do need help finding maybe where it is to get a loan, where to connect with, and so that we can keep people away from predatory lenders and title ponds and things like that really do, I see, cause Alice families to fall down that hill, that slippery slope that leads to more problems and issues. And I think a lot of y'all's services people still don't know. I mean, I know y'all spend a lot of time getting y'all's information out of products and services y'all offer, but you got to tell someone 20 times before it finally sinks in. And we're dealing with that same thing. So I think we can help promote. We have a strong relation with Southeastern Credit Union, and they have operations in multiple locations of our county coverage. There's also other credit unions we're not connected with in our area, but Southeastern's a great partner. But Brittany can speak more about that with what they've been trying to do with their 211 system in Augusta.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add is that that we're working to make sure our credit unions are in there, and what would be great is at the end of the year we can come back and let our local credit unions in our area know how many calls we've taken and how many referrals we've given, and hopefully that will turn into some business.
I will say we have a strategic plan to make sure we share the information to our membership on VITA, the income tax preparation free service. Is it correct me if I'm wrong, is it 60,000 and under? Is it different? And I know our area, I think that's about it. A family with income under that can basically, so many of our members can't wait to get their hands on their tax refund. They pay outrageous fees to do so. So, if we can help, if a handful listen, that we can save them money and guide them to a free tax service that's going to do the right thing. And it's just granted, and we've done this for a lifetime. Some of us on this phone call, certainly for me, 36 years. Often we preach and we preach and we preach, and we don't ever reach them all, but we do reach some of them. And when we can, we all have some great stories of folks we've helped over time, and that's one little way.
Anybody else?
All right, who do you get to do the tax return for you?
I'll have to ask the experts, but it's a program already set up. They've got it set up, and they're basically providing guidance to the folks that will prepare the returns for them. George or Brittany or
yeah, it's volunteer driven. Ultimately, you have to have volunteers that will do the tax returns. They're trained by the IRS. This is a partnership United Ways have had with the IRS for a long time.
And I would say more of your bigger metro United Ways participate in VITA and have multiple locations. You may find it more difficult on the smaller side of United Ways to offer that program and service, but it is something that would be great to be expanded more statewide.
Anybody else? Thanks for asking, Huey. Thanks for getting the ball rolling.
You're welcome.
Well,
Great.
I want to give a shout out to our good friend Justin Calloway. He texted me, he's on this call. He was the CEO of the Brunswick United Way of coastal Georgia, and really pushed for the Alice for us to move forward with this back in February of 2023. His background is in banking and financial advising, and now he's with Marshland Credit Union. So he can speak on both sides of the equation and the partnership, but we may not have pushed for this, because when we decided, I mean, it feels like a long time we've had Alice, but when February 23, when we moved forward as a state association, we knew we needed it, but we had no idea how we were going to pay for it. And we stepped out in faith, and Justin was a big supporter of that, and knew he needed it for his area. So thank you, Justin.
Well, that's great. I didn't know that about Justin. We're going to have some more conversations with you and kind of find out some more. I guess we've got like 5 minutes left in your hour. I definitely don't want to go over. I know everybody is busy, but I just kind of want to, this is an important initiative, and I think it can make a huge impact for the state and for the families and members we support. Just kind of stepping back, and when you get off the Zoom and you're kind of thinking about if this is something you want to participate in and how can you help, just kind of off the top of your head, or email me later, what additional support or resources do you think we can provide to you as the Southeastern Credit Union Foundation? Is it going to be more opportunities to get together like this and talk through? I know everybody loves a Zoom, right? But it is a great time to kind of get together and be able to share ideas and engage. Or is it potentially another in-person meeting? Or is it just us getting you contacts for your local United Way? What can we do to help you guys move along in this process and make it a real success and provide great impact?
I can say what just Michael just suggested, the ATM, ITM, we already do that. So it's something I can look into. Boys and Girls Club, we already partner with them. So now we can potentially do financial education. So thank you, Michael. You just gave me 2 great ideas that we're already doing that we can expand on. So I know sometimes it's hard to get together in person, but this has been very beneficial. And I hope we can get to do it more and share success stories more, so we can get more motivated, but also learn from each other. So I appreciate everyone's input.
Well, thank you. United Way, we really can be the chamber for the human service sector and connect people with those key nonprofits that are doing great work across the region, because a lot of them we're funding and we get reports, we see their financials, we have relationships with their top staff, so we can help bridge that gap. And we also really want to help and partner and build, through public policy with y'all's Hill Day and y'all's lobbyists. We have a partnership with Terminus that also represents a lot across the human service with domestic violence, CACs, Family Connection across the state. As we move and build out our state association, we hope to see the United Way logo and used in support of public policy and advocacy work, where our logo, or maybe Boys and Girls Club, Red Cross, or others, or the credit unions can look to help Alice families and really decrease, adverse childhood experiences. And overall is where we're trying to move to. And a lot of the work that y'all advocate for aligns with the work we're trying to do too, especially in helping people be more financially secure, not be taken advantage of, have opportunities for education and financial wealth and independence.
Any other resources? I mean, great ideas are great ideas, but anything I can help to kind of kickstart your journey on this great initiative, just let me know. We'll be happy to support however we can. And I would also like to remind you that if you are considering doing a new product or service, especially in 2025, I'd look to see what year we were in. Don't forget that the foundation does have community impact grants that will open again, and that's a $5,000 grant. So if there's an opportunity where we could partner with you to get these products and services or whatever projects you're thinking about, look out for that. We want to help move you guys along as best we can too. So don't forget about us. We're here to help as well. Any other, as we got 2 minutes, any closing thoughts from my other fearless leaders, Brittany, Michael, Roy, George, or Kabir, you had something? Did you
I just have a quick question for the United folks. I don't know if you see the need for text ID lending or ITIN lending from the people that, you interact with.
Can you explain that better? I'm sorry.
So people who don't have social security number, don't have credits, want to, avail tax ID number or income tax ID number, ITIN, and then get loans, especially the daily needs, credit card, small dollar amount, maybe an auto loan up to $5,000 to $10,000 on the tax ID number.
Wow.
I know it's a big need in Texas. We are seeing some in Florida as well. We are seeing a little bit in Georgia. We have a branch in Florida as well, but haven't heard a lot in Georgia, but we are looking into that right now.
Yeah, I can definitely see that, especially with our migrant communities in certain counties. One thing we see that's such a need is just the people that don't have ID or birth certificate, and then the cost to do that. We help with some funding of that with our local homeless shelter, because so many things can't happen unless you pay the $80 or to get your birth certificate from New York State, and they're all different price, and to pay for IDs. So we see that as a big barrier for moving forward. But I'd like to learn more about that, about what services y'all are offering, especially to I'm guessing the migrant population. Because we do have that in our area of South Georgia, especially certain counties are stronger than others. But I just want to say thank you for y'all, this partnership, y'all believing in us. We understand the value and the opportunity this is, and the strength of the credit unions, but this was a big opportunity. So, and we're excited to see where this goes. But we're very appreciative of y'all going down this journey with us. And I want to say United Ways right now has some strong leadership across the state, especially in the key metro areas, but even the small United Ways are really running well, and we're moving together in a strong way across Georgia.
That's good.
Thank you guys so much. Stephen, you're off mute. Were you going to say anything?
Yes, I was just going to say that I did get a lot out of this last meeting y'all had. I had my marketing person sit in on it. And so I'm going to take a lot of this stuff up and research it, and get in touch with our local United Way rep and start working with them.
Thank you. Great. You ended my day awesome, Stephen. Thank you for that. You might have made my week. How about that? Well, thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. And we will probably try to schedule another one of these, maybe a little more towards the end of the year. I love the idea sharing and kind of getting together. So be on the lookout. Hopefully you can attend again and tell all your peers too. We want more on this call. We want more people engaged. So if you have any questions later on, feel free to reach out to me. Otherwise, have a good rest of your day, gang. Thank you so, so much.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.